I'm Jane. I'm 46 years old, and up until just recently, I truly believed I had the perfect marriage. You know that feeling when everything seems right? When you think you found your forever person? That was me. All in. I want to share my story with you not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Because someone out there needs to hear it. And before I begin, I'm going to ask one small thing from you. If you're listening right now, please hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel. I know it might seem like just another click, but for me, it's a way to make sure this reaches the people who need it. Drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from and maybe what time it is where you are. I read every single one because knowing there's someone out there listening, really listening, it gives me strength. Trust me when I say this. You're going to want to hear how this ends. Because if this could happen to me, a cautious, educated woman, someone who thought she knew her husband better than anyone, it could happen to anyone. Now, let me take you back to the beginning, to when everything still felt normal. Brian and I met 5 years ago at this local charity event. I was volunteering at a booth for a literacy program. I'm a middle school teacher based in Philly, and he showed up to donate. He was charming, disarmingly kind from the moment we locked eyes. Brian had this warm, earnest smile, the kind that makes you feel seen, safe, like home. We struck up a conversation over coffee right there at the venue. Nothing fancy, just two people talking, laughing, connecting like we'd known each other forever. I remember thinking, wow, how lucky am I? That such a wonderful man just walked into my life out of nowhere. When Brian proposed, I said yes, without a second thought. We got married a year later. Small ceremony, just our closest friends and family. I can still picture his eyes brimming with tears as he said his vows. He promised to love me, protect me, in sickness and in health, forever. And I believed him. I felt so safe that day, wrapped in the warmth of what I thought was love. I had no idea those vows would twist into something I couldn't even imagine. The first couple of years of our marriage were blissful, or at least I remember them that way. We moved into this cozy 2-story house on a quiet street, planted hydrangeas by the front porch, painted our kitchen a cheery yellow together. I kept teaching, and every afternoon I'd come home to Brian cooking dinner or waiting with a glass of my favourite Merlot. He worked in finance from home, which meant he was almost always there. At the time, I thought that was wonderful. I mean, I could sneak in a hug or a kiss between grading papers. Most evenings, we curled up on the couch, watching our favourite shows, laughing, relaxing. He made me feel cherished. Looking back now, I can see how gradually my world narrowed to just him and me. But back then, it felt like we were simply soulmates, happily cocooned in our love. Brian insisted on doing things for me, to make my life easier, he'd say. If I came home exhausted from a parent-teacher conference, he'd rub my shoulders. and shoo away my concerns about lesson plans or laundry. "I've got you, baby," he'd whisper. "You do so much. Let me handle things." And it seemed romantic. I mean, what wife wouldn't want a husband so eager to pamper her? I remember one night, about a year into our marriage, I had plans to meet my old college roommate Kathy for dinner. I'd been looking forward to it for weeks. Had my outfit picked out, everything. But just an hour before I was supposed to leave, I got this splitting headache. Out of nowhere, I was dressed up and ready to go, but the pain was intense. Brian immediately stepped in. "Baby, let me call her for you," he said. "You shouldn't have to deal with that right now." I resisted. I really wanted to see her. But he pressed gently, saying I should rest, that my health mattered more. And then he made the call to Kathy himself. Told her I wasn't feeling well. I ended up spending the night in cozy on the couch with him. Grateful I didn't have to worry about letting her down. At the time, it felt thoughtful, caring, and I thought, wow, I'm so lucky to have a husband who looks out for me like this. To everyone else, Brian was the model of a devoted husband. My parents adored him. My mum would gush, "Jane, he's a keeper. Look how he dotes on you." And he did. He brought me breakfast in bed on weekends, left little love notes tucked into my work bag. He always made sure we shared a goodnight kiss before drifting off. If I was working late grading papers, drowning in lesson plans, he'd show up with tea in hand, a soft smile, a gentle, "Don't overdo it, babe." I felt so lucky. I thought this is what a healthy marriage is supposed to be. I had absolutely no reason to suspect that behind all those loving gestures, something dark was beginning to grow. My life felt like a beautiful, safe bubble. I had no idea it was all a facade, and that I was about to lose so much more than just my trust. In the early days of our marriage, I hardly noticed how my world shrank to revolve entirely around Brian. It happened so gradually. At first, it was little things, tiny moments that didn't feel like red flags at the time. Brian would say he missed me when I went out with friends for happy hour. And I'd smile, tell him I'd make it up to him later. So I started skipping those nights just to spend time with him. He never forbade me from seeing anyone, no, he didn't have to. I was happy to choose him because I loved him. And I assumed he just loved me that much too. My best friend, Lauren, eventually pointed it out. How rare our coffee dates had become. We'd been meeting every week since college. But after I got married, those meetups dropped to maybe once a month. One day, she laughed and said, "I have to book an appointment to see you now." "Huh? Mr. Wonderful? Keeping you on a short leash?" She said it with a smile, but I saw the concern in her eyes. I jumped to defend him. "No, it's not like that," I told her. "Brian just loves spending time with me. I'm happy, I promise." Lauren let it drop. But thinking back now, I realized she wasn't entirely convinced. Family visits started to taper off over time. My parents live about 2 hours away, and in the beginning, Brian and I drove down regularly for Sunday dinners. But then the excuses started. Quiet at first, then more frequent. Work was really busy, or he wasn't feeling well, always right at the last minute. And he made it sound like it truly pained him to stay behind. "You go ahead without me, honey," he'd say. "I don't want to ruin your time. I just really shouldn't travel today." And I hated showing up without him. Everyone would ask where he was, and I'd have to cover for him every single time. Eventually, I started going less often too. I told myself it was understandable. We were building our own life. He really was busy sometimes. But still, a part of me felt guilty, like I was slowly abandoning my family. When I finally voiced that to Brian, he just wrapped me in a hug and said, "You know I love your family. We'll make it next time. They understand life's hectic right now." And his voice was so reassuring, I let the guilt go. Another subtle shift was how our finances and household decisions slowly moved into Brian's hands. He worked in finance, and I've never really been a numbers person. So when he offered to take over the bills and manage our budget, I was honestly relieved. "You focus on inspiring those kids at school," he said one day, with that playful grin. "Let me handle the boring money stuff." And it felt like good teamwork. Why stress myself out when he was so willing? I handed him the reins without a second thought. Later on, I realized that meant I no longer saw bank statements. No credit card bills, no account activity. He could have been doing anything with our money, and I wouldn't have known the difference. But at the time, it all just seemed efficient, caring. Brian also had this gentle way of shaping how I saw people. If a friend said something he didn't like, he wouldn't criticize them directly. He'd frame it as concern for me. "Lauren seemed a bit snappy with you today," he'd say. "Are you sure she's being supportive? I just want you to have positive people around you." Or, "Your colleague was asking a lot from you again. They should respect your time more. Love." And I started second guessing people, wondering if maybe Brian saw something I didn't. Over time, I pulled back. A little more from friends, a little less pushback at work, because I started to believe maybe others were taking advantage of my kind nature. An idea that Brian so softly, so convincingly planted. Piece by piece, brick by brick, he built a wall around me. And he used love and protection as mortar. And the hardest part? I welcomed it, thinking it was devotion. By the time I realized how alone I was except for him, it was too late. There's a memory from around that time that still gives me chills. One weekend, I casually mentioned taking a short trip with a few girlfriends. Just a fun girls' getaway like we used to do. When I brought it up, Brian's face clouded just for a second, barely noticeable. Then he caught himself and gave this soft, sad little smile. "Of course you should go, if you want," he said, so gently. "I'll miss you, but I'll manage." And he looked so forlorn that I felt bad immediately for even suggesting I leave him behind. So I didn't go. I cancelled the trip. Instead, Brian planned a romantic hiking weekend for just the two of us. We had a lovely time, laughing, holding hands, taking selfies by waterfalls. But looking back now, I see it for exactly what it was: another quiet maneuver to keep me tethered to him, and only him. None of these incidents by themselves set off alarm bells, but taken together, they painted a very different picture. A man slowly tightening his hold on me under the guise of love. And at the time, I couldn't see it. I wore rose-colored glasses, and through them, everything looked like devotion. I told myself I was lucky. Lucky to have a husband who just wanted to be with me all the time. Little did I know that this loving isolation was laying the groundwork for what he planned to do next. The changes were so subtle. I started blaming myself whenever something felt off. It began with little things slipping my mind, or at least that's what I thought was happening. I'd misplace my car keys and be absolutely certain I left them on the hook by the door, only to find them later in my purse. I chalked it up to being absent-minded. Maybe I was just distracted, tired. I'd open the fridge and find leftovers I didn't remember cooking. And when I'd ask Brain about it, he'd just laugh softly and say, "Honey, you made that casserole on Monday, remember? You've been so busy. No wonder you forgot." And I'd feel silly, embarrassed, for not recalling something so basic. Then there were the conversations I could have sworn we never had. One night, as we were getting ready for bed, Brian casually said, "I'm glad you agreed we should postpone the trip to see your parents next month. We'll visit later when things are less hectic." I paused mid-brush, toothbrush in hand. What trip? I didn't remember any such conversation. "When did I say that?" I asked, trying to sound neutral. Brian looked at me, almost confused. "Just this morning at breakfast," he said. "You mentioned you were overwhelmed with work and thought rescheduling would be best." And I agreed. I racked my brain. I remembered breakfast. I remembered him saying I should call Mum sometime soon. But I did not remember agreeing to cancel the trip. I just stood there, dumbfounded. Finally, I gave this nervous little laugh and said, "I guess I was so tired I completely blanked on that." "Wow." He smiled, kissed my forehead. "You have been really stressed," he said softly. "It wasn't a big convo, hun. You were probably on autopilot." And the way he said it so warm, so understanding, I felt embarrassed for even questioning him. I ended up apologizing. Imagine that. Apologizing for forgetting something I never even said. He just stroked my hair and whispered, "Oh, okay, no need to apologize. You've had a lot on your plate. Maybe you should get more sleep." This kind of exchange started happening more and more. He'd reference things I supposedly said or did, and I'd have zero memory of them. If I expressed surprise or even a little doubt, he'd just smile and make a joke about my forgetfulness. "Oh, my silly Jane, you'd lose your head if it wasn't attached," he'd say with a wink. It was always said with affection, never anger, never blame. So I started believing him. Maybe I was just that exhausted, a little scatterbrained. But then things escalated beyond simple forgetfulness. I began to feel unsteady, not just in memory, but in my own body. I was constantly tired, no matter how early I went to bed. Focusing at work got harder. My brain felt foggy. One day, I was standing in front of my class mid-lesson when my vision blurred. I completely lost my train of thought, a lesson I knew by heart. I had to sit down. I laughed it off to the students, called it a dizzy spell. But inside, I was shaken, deeply shaken. What was happening to me? At home, I'd sometimes wake up in the morning in a completely different spot than where I remembered falling asleep. One early morning, I found myself curled up on the living room couch with a blanket over me. I always slept in our bed. Always. So that was bizarre. The last thing I remembered was lying in bed the night before. How did I end up on the couch? I stumbled, confused, back to the bedroom. Brian was there yawning, stretching like it was just another morning. He looked up and noticed my disheveled state. "Why were you on the couch, babe?" he asked. I'm not sure," I stammered. "I just woke up there. I don't even remember going downstairs." Brian raised an eyebrow, then gave a little chuckle. "You did come back to bed for a bit," he said. "Don't you remember? Around midnight, you got up saying you couldn't sleep, went to watch TV. I guess you conked out down there. I came and draped a blanket on you." I tried hard to remember any of that. I couldn't. There was just nothing. A blank spot in my memory. "I was half asleep, I guess," I murmured, trying to make sense of it. But the truth, waking up somewhere without remembering how, was honestly frightening. He got up and led me gently back downstairs. It was time to get ready for work. But all day, I was troubled. That moment, waking up on the couch, wouldn't leave my mind. It wasn't the first time I'd had a gap like that, but it was the first time it genuinely scared me. Not long after, I started noticing bruises. The first one was on my upper arm, a small purple bruise the size of a fingerprint. I found it one morning while changing. My stomach dropped. It looked like someone had gripped me hard. I showed it to Brian, feeling a little nervous, though I didn't know why. "I swear, I don't know how I got this," I said quietly. Brian frowned with concern. Then his expression softened. "Baby, you've been bumping into things a lot lately," he said. "Remember last week you walked right into the door frame? You were so sleepy." And that did happen. I had bruised my thigh on the doorframe in a daze. So maybe I'd done something similar, and I just didn't realize it. He gently suggested, "You might be a little anemic or something, bruising easily. We should get you checked out if it keeps happening." He even offered to make the appointment himself, and he did. We went to a clinic, just a basic workup. Everything came back normal. The doctor said it might be stress, lack of sleep, nothing serious. Brian seized on that immediately. On the drive home, he said, "See, stress. That's why you're so out of it lately. Teaching is a tough job. You're probably just running yourself ragged." And I wanted to believe that. I really did. Memory gaps, exhaustion, bruises. Maybe it was just stress. My job was demanding. And yeah, I was a perfectionist. Brian's concern made me feel cared for, but also a little helpless, like I was this delicate thing that needed even more of his help. That's when he introduced something new to our nightly routine. We were in the kitchen one evening after dinner. I was rubbing my temples, fighting off a headache. Brian opened the cupboard and pulled down a small amber pill bottle. "What's that?" I asked, watching him shake a pill into his hand. "It's a supplement I picked up for you," he said. "All natural. It's supposed to help with sleep and anxiety. I've been doing some reading. A lot of teachers take these." I gave him a tired smile. "Another vitamin, huh? You and your health kick." He handed me the pill and a glass of water. "Trust me," he said. "It's got magnesium, valerian root, all that good stuff. It'll help you relax." I was touched. He'd gone out of his way to find something that might ease my stress. "Thank you," I whispered, genuinely grateful. I swallowed the capsule, not even thinking to question what was in it. Why would I? This was my husband, offering me help. That was the first night. I took what I would later learn was not a mere supplement. Within 30 minutes, I felt drowsy, but not normally tired. It was heavy, unnatural. Brian guided me to bed, kissed my forehead, and I drifted off into the blackest, deepest sleep of my life. From that night on, taking my vitamin became a common routine. Every evening without fail, Brian would bring me a pill and a glass of water. "Time for your nightly dose of calm," he'd joke. Sometimes he even took one himself, or pretended to. I still don't know if he ever actually swallowed them. At first, I thought they were a godsend. I started sleeping through the night no more, 3 a.m. wake-ups, no anxiety spirals about work. I'd close my eyes, and then bam, morning light. In those first few days, I even thanked Brian. "I haven't slept this soundly in ages," I told him one morning as he handed me my coffee. He beamed. So proud, so pleased to have helped. But then the downside began to show. Sure, I was sleeping longer, but I started waking up feeling drugged. There's no other word for it. My head ached. My muscles felt heavy, like I'd been dragged out of anesthesia. At first, I shrugged it off. Maybe it was just deep sleep, alarm timing. Brian noticed my sluggish mornings and started doing even more to help. He'd pack my lunch, warm up my car on cold mornings, set my work bag by the door. And yeah, part of me appreciated it, but another part felt a little infantilized. "You really don't have to do everything," I remember saying one day, half laughing, half pleading. He kissed my cheek and said, "I know I don't have to. I want to. I love taking care of you, Jane." Meanwhile, the memory lapses continued. Even worse, I found texts to friends I didn't remember sending. The words sounded like me almost, but not quite. Too short, too formal, missing my usual emojis. When I brought it up, Brian just chuckled. "You probably replied half asleep," he said. "I've seen you do it. You don't even remember. And it was true, I had checked my phone groggily before. So again, I doubted myself instead of him. And the bruises, they kept showing up. Small ones on my thighs, a larger one on my hip, every single time. I had no clue where they came from. One night I woke with a sore spot on my right side. It felt like I'd lain on something hard or been bumped, but I was too dazed to fully wake up. The next morning, sure enough, a bluish bruise had bloomed there. I even joked to Brian, maybe I sleepwalk and go fight clubbing without knowing it. He didn't laugh. Not even a smile. Just looked at me with that gentle, pitying expression. The kind that makes you feel fragile. You've been under so much strain, he murmured, pulling me into a hug. Maybe you should take a break from work just for a bit. Use some of your sick days. You can't pour from an empty cup. I resisted. I hated calling out sick, hated being away from my students. But as the days went on, I started getting alarmingly dizzy at school, struggling to keep up with basic tasks. I started to fear that maybe something was medically wrong with me. Chronic fatigue, neurological issues. My mind even wandered to dark places. Early onset Alzheimer's, a brain tumor. Why else would I be forgetting conversations, losing chunks of time? Then one afternoon, right in the middle of class, I nearly fainted. I was reading aloud to my students when the room suddenly swayed. I caught myself on the desk. A couple of kids jumped up, alarmed. I laughed it off, sat down until the wave passed. But inside, I was shaken. I went home early that day. Brian was beside himself with worry when I told him. That was the moment I gave in tearfully and agreed to take time off. Just a week, I whispered as he held me. Maybe a week off will fix whatever this is. He kissed the top of my head. We'll figure this out, he said. I just need you well. So I finally took a sick week, at Brian's urging, to rest. But that night, something didn't sit right. I felt uneasy, so I only took half of my usual pill. I wasn't even sure why. Maybe some part of me was waking up. Maybe a small part already knew. Nearly an hour passed. Nothing happened. No heavy crash into sleep. Then, around 2 a.m., I stirred. For the first time in ages, I found myself half awake in the middle of the night. And I noticed Brian wasn't beside me. The faint sound of a low humming reached my ears, like an appliance running somewhere. Groggily, I got up. The sound was coming from behind the closed basement door down the hall. A sliver of light glowed beneath it. My heart started to race. I crept closer, barefoot, careful. The door was open, just a crack. Peeking through, I saw a faint light from below and heard Brian's voice. Low, tense, like he was on a phone call. I held my breath and strained to listen. Told you to wait until next week, he said. A pause. No, it's not safe to do that here right now. My wife is still awake some nights. I can't risk it. Yes, I gave her more, but listen, it's under control. My blood ran cold. Gave her more, he meant me, and the pills. What wasn't safe to do here? Who was he talking to? A dozen terrifying possibilities flooded my mind. Then creak the floorboard beneath me betrayed me. I jolted and rushed back to the bedroom. Silent, fast, heart pounding. I slipped under the covers. I forced myself to lie still. Moments later, I heard the basement door click shut. Then Brian's footsteps. He opened the bedroom door gently, just stood there, watching me. Through mostly closed eyes, I saw him, standing in the hall light. I kept perfectly still, slowed my breathing, played asleep. After a long moment, he closed the door and eventually came back to bed. He never realized I had been up, but I lay there, wide awake until dawn. My mind was racing with what I'd heard. The man I loved, the man I trusted with my life, was hiding something. And he had just admitted to giving me more. More of whatever was knocking me out night after night. I felt a surge of fear and something else. Resolve. I had to find out exactly what was going on. It took all my acting skills to behave normally the next day. Inside, I was a mess. Anxious, uneasy. But I knew if I tipped Brian off even slightly, he might clam up. Or worse, I couldn't afford that. Not when I was this close to the truth. All day, I replayed his midnight phone call over and over in my head. Who was on the other end? What wasn't safe to do while I was awake? And the way he said, "My wife is still awake some nights," it sent chills down my spine. He was clearly drugging me on purpose. Not for rest, for control. This wasn't a supplement. It wasn't vitamins. It was calculated. My mind leapt to the worst possibilities. Was he cheating on me? Bringing someone into our home at night? Was he involved in something criminal? The basement, locked, always off limits. Just storage, he said. Workout equipment. Then why the light, the machinery at 2 a.m.? I had to find out. And I realized I needed proof. No one would believe me without it. Not even myself, if I hadn't heard what I heard. If Brian was doing something criminal, evidence would be my only weapon. So I made a plan. Messy, rushed, but it was something. I'd fake it. Pretend to take the pill that night. Act fully asleep. Then follow him. The thought terrified me. My hands shook just imagining it. If he caught me, I didn't know what he'd do. The man I married had never even raised his voice at me. But this version of Brian, this stranger in the shadows, I couldn't trust him. All day I went back and forth. Call someone, Lauren, the police? But what would I say? My perfect husband might be drugging me and doing something awful in the basement, but I don't know what. No evidence. Just a gut feeling and a snippet of a conversation. Brian was respected, professional. On paper, he was perfect. People would think I was losing it. Some days, even I wondered. So I pushed down my fear and smiled through the evening. That night, Brian didn't seem suspicious. He was his usual attentive self. Made us dinner. fretted over me like a mother hen. You barely ate. Maybe some tea? I forced a smile. Even joked, if I drink any more tea, I'll float away. Inside, I was counting the minutes to bedtime. I changed into pajamas, climbed into bed. My heart pounded so loud, I was sure he could hear it. Right on schedule, Brian brought me the pill and water. That tiny capsule in his hand made my stomach turn. How many of those had I swallowed without question? How many nights had I been completely vulnerable? Thank you, I murmured, taking it from him. I popped the pill in my mouth, took a big sip of water, tilted my head back like always. Years of practice taking vitamins made the act easy. I even opened my mouth afterward in a joking, see, all gone gesture. Brian chuckled. Completely fooled. The pill sat bitter under my tongue. We snuggled for a bit. Brian scrolled on his phone. I pretended to get drowsy. After about 15 minutes, I mumbled a sleepy, good night, love you, and rolled over. Let my body go limp. Eventually, he turned off his phone. Then the lights. I lay there, eyes shut, heart pounding so loud I could feel it in my ears. Keeping my breathing slow and even was the hardest part. Every cell in me wanted to bolt. About 20 minutes passed. Then I felt him shift. He slid out of bed slowly. Through my lashes, I saw his silhouette lean close, so close I felt his breath against my cheek. He was checking me, making sure I was out. I didn't move, didn't even twitch. After a few seconds, he stood straight, then quietly slipped out, closing the bedroom door behind him. This was it. My chance. I counted to 10 before moving. Then I slid out from under the covers. The bitter pill was tucked in a folded tissue still in the nightstand. My mouth tasted like metal. I grimaced. The house was dark and silent. I crept to the door, eased it open. From downstairs, I saw a faint glow, heard the soft click of the basement lock. Our floors were old, creaky. I stepped only where I knew they'd be quiet. At the top of the stairs, I spotted Brian, crossing the living room, heading toward the kitchen and the basement door. He was carrying something, a duffel bag. He disappeared from view. I heard the basement door open and close. I had to move. Now, I hurried down the stairs barefoot, silent. Every beat of my heart felt like a drum inside my ribs. But I kept going. At the bottom, I ducked into the hallway shadows. The basement door was ajar. This time, he hadn't locked it. A yellowish light glowed beneath it. I moved closer. Then I heard voices, muted, low, Brian's, and another man's. Through the narrow gap of the door, I looked down the basement stairs. Brian was standing with his back to me, facing another man, burly, wearing a baseball cap pulled low. And then I saw her. A young woman, barely out of her teens. The stranger was gripping her arm. She looked limp, dazed, like she couldn't even stand properly. Her hands were zip-tied. She wore an oversized t-shirt, no pants, one shoe. That detail, one shoe, it hit me like a hammer. A small thing, but it made the horror feel real. I clamped a hand over my mouth. I couldn't make a sound. My brain was spinning, failing to make sense of what I was watching. Why? Why was there a girl, restrained, in my basement? With my husband and a man I'd never seen before. The other man was speaking in a hushed, impatient tone. Taking too long. We need to move her now. Brian replied, his voice tight. I told you, I had to wait until my wife was out. The last thing we need is her waking up. They moved a step. I instinctively shrank back behind the door, trembling. And then it hit me. Human trafficking. The phrase flashed through my mind, sharp and cold. It had to be. That poor girl, drugged, restrained, and my Brian, was helping make her disappear. I peeked again through the door. Brian was handing over the duffel bag. The man opened it, rifled through. Money, maybe? The girl moaned softly, drugged out of her mind. Brian glanced at her and said, She's been sedated. She shouldn't give you trouble, but gag her just in case. And be quiet, please. His voice had a note of panic now, like he knew how close this was to unraveling. Shock turned to rage, to disgust, to heartbreak. This man who held me at night was calmly handing off a human life like cargo. And all this time, he kept me drugged. I needed proof, evidence, something no one could ignore. With shaking hands, I raised my phone, hit record. The footage was grainy, the angle poor, but I got it. The stranger hoisted the girl over his shoulder. Brian whispered, Go out the back. Hurry. They were leaving. Right now. With her, I wanted to scream, to throw myself at him, to stop this. But I knew I couldn't stop both of them. And her safety came first. I sobbed silently, but I didn't stop filming. The man carried the girl up the stairs. I slipped further into shadow. Closer now, I saw her face, barely awake, gagged, terrified. For a fraction of a second, her eyes met mine. She likely didn't see me, but I saw her, and something in me shattered. Brian opened the back door. Cool night air rushed in. Outside, in the alley, a dark van waited. This was really happening. A girl being trafficked out of my home. Brian said, Drive safe and don't come back here. I'll let you know when things cool down. The man nodded, vanished into the night. Brian stood there for a moment, watching, then closed and locked the door. I heard him exhale, a long, shaky breath. He thought it was over. But I had seen it. I had the video, and there was still evidence in the basement. Quietly, I made my way upstairs, while Brian lingered in the kitchen, maybe wiping things down, maybe just calming his nerves. I slipped back into bed, laid still, eyes wide open in the dark, and only then did I let the tears come. Silent, endless, real. The man I loved was a monster. It was real. There was no more doubting my sanity. No more wondering if I'd imagined it. I had seen it. Brain came back to the bedroom not long after. I steadied my breathing, eyes closed, face relaxed. He moved around quietly. Then I felt the mattress dip as he climbed back into bed. He let out a long, shaky sigh in the dark, like a man releasing tension after a hard night's work. Then, to my absolute disgust, he scooted over and draped an arm around me. That same familiar, loving gesture, the one that used to make me feel safe. I had to fight every muscle in my body not to recoil. I stayed perfectly still, pretending to be asleep, deep asleep. Eventually, his breathing slowed, evened out. He fell asleep, as if nothing had changed, as if the world hadn't just cracked open beneath my feet. But I didn't sleep a second. My mind spiraled. Fear, rage, grief, all pulling me under in waves. I kept thinking of that girl, of how helpless she looked, of how close I came to not seeing her at all. And then the thought hit me hard. Were there others? Before her? All those nights Brian drugged me. Is less than Bray, is greater than. Was he doing this the whole time? Letting strange men into our house while I lay unconscious upstairs? The sickness rose in me like a tide. I had to swallow it down, quietly. I couldn't make a sound. Not yet. By the time dawn's grey light crept through our window, I had made a decision. I would not let Brian go on one more day as a free man. I didn't care about the fallout, the shame, the heartbreak. My life had already crumbled. What mattered now was getting help. For that girl, for whoever else came before her, for me, because I saw it clearly now. I wasn't just Brian's wife. I was one of his victims. He used my trust, my body, my home to run something vile. That truth almost crushed me. I bit down on my tongue until I tasted blood, just to stay quiet. There would be time to break down later, but not now. Now, I had to survive the next few hours and get out. When Brian's alarm chimed at 7 a.m., I closed my eyes and pretended to wake slowly, not because I was tired, because I needed him to believe I was. Inside, my body felt wired and hollow at the same time, like I'd slept on fear instead of a pillow. He rolled toward me, smiling like it was any other morning. Morning, beautiful. His lips brushed my temple. I didn't move. I couldn't. Morning, I murmured, keeping my eyes half closed. I let out a soft yawn I didn't feel. I could sleep another few hours, I said. He laughed. Easy. Warm. That's good. Means you're finally catching up on rest. He swung his legs out of bed. You stay as long as you want. I'll make coffee. The door closed behind him. Only then did my body betray me. A shudder, a tear I wiped away fast, like it was a mistake. The way he could sound so normal, so kind, after what he'd done. I didn't understand it. I still don't. I knew one thing. I couldn't run. Not yet. I had to leave, like everything was fine. Like I didn't know. Like I wasn't already gone inside. Downstairs, he was humming while flipping pancakes. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen. The normalcy hit me harder than fear. I sat at the table and wrapped my hands around the mug he set in front of me. Warm, domestic, familiar. I was thinking, I said lightly, maybe I'll get out today. Lauren invited me for coffee, some window shopping, fresh air. I kept my voice casual, almost cheerful. He glanced over his shoulder. I held my breath. That sounds great, he said. You've been cooped up too long. Tell Lauren I say hi. Just like that. Permission granted. Relief rushed through me so fast it made me dizzy. He talked about work while I picked at the pancakes. My stomach locked tight. I nodded. I smiled. I watched the clock. When I excused myself to get dressed, my legs felt unsteady. In the bedroom, I moved carefully. Jeans, sweater, sturdy shoes. I packed my purse on purpose. Wallet, phone, the pill wrapped tight in tissue. I transferred the video to a flash drive. Wrote down the license plate number. Checked everything twice. Then my eyes landed on our wedding photo. Us smiling, happy, or pretending. I turned the frame face down. And for the first time that morning, I felt ready to leave. Brian was wiping down the kitchen when I came back downstairs. I forced a smile. I'm going to head out now, I said lightly. Lauren texted. She's free, earlier. All right, he replied. You taking the car, or is she picking you up? Oh, she's picking me up, I said without missing a beat. She's already nearby. I chose that lie carefully. I didn't want him offering to drive me, or worse, insisting. He set the cloth aside and walked toward me. My body stiffened on instinct. But he didn't accuse, didn't question. He pulled me into a hug. I stood rigid in his arms. To him, it probably felt like exhaustion. To me, it felt like standing inside a trap. You okay? He murmured. You feel tense. I forced myself to soften. Just a little. I'm okay, I whispered. And for the first time that morning, it wasn't entirely a lie. Just a headache. He tilted my chin and kissed my forehead. Take it easy. If you get tired, come home, all right? All right, I echoed. My heart was pounding so hard, I was sure he could feel it through that kiss. Then he stepped back, and suddenly, I was free. I walked out the front door, every muscle screaming at me not to run. I turned once and waved through the window. He waved back, then disappeared inside. The door closed. The autumn air hit my face cool, sharp, real. It felt like the first full breath I'd taken in months. I didn't have a car waiting, so I walked, fast, down the block, then farther, until I reached a busier street. Only then did I pull out my phone and call Lauren. She answered cheerful, Hey girl, how's the staycation going? And that's when I broke. Right there on the sidewalk, I started sobbing. No warning, no control. Jane, she said, alarm flooding her voice. Jane, what's wrong? I tried to speak. Nothing came out but air and shaking breath. It's Brian, I finally managed. Lauren, oh God. People were staring. I ducked into the doorway of a closed shop. I'm not safe, I whispered. I need your help. Please, can you come get me? Right now. She didn't ask questions, didn't hesitate. Tell me where you are, she said. I'm coming. Right now. 10 minutes later, the longest 10 minutes of my life. This becondaditas, and her car pulled up. I climbed in and locked the door with shaking fingers. The second I saw her face, I fell apart again. Jesus, Jane, she whispered, grabbing my hand. What happened? Did he hurt you? I shook my head, then nodded, then shook it again. I don't know how to answer that, I said. Can we drive? I don't want to be anywhere near. I couldn't finish. Of course, she said, already pulling away. She drove us to a quiet parking lot behind a row of small shops. Empty, safe. She turned to me and said firmly, "Start from the beginning." So I did. Slow at first, then faster. I told her about the pills, the missing time, the things that never made sense. When I said I thought he'd been drugging me, she gasped and covered her mouth. But I kept going. I told her about the phone call, about the basement, about what I saw last night. And when I finally stopped talking, the silence said everything. By the time I got to describing the girl and the van, Lauren was crying too. "Oh my God," she kept whispering. "Oh my God, Jane. This is—" She stopped herself. "No, I believe you. I do believe you. It's just horrific." I never doubted she believed me, but I needed proof anyway. For her, for me, I pulled out the flash drive and my phone. My hands were shaking as I opened the video. The clip was short, unsteady, but clear enough. Brian's face, the man beside him, the girl being carried through our back door. Seeing it again made my stomach drop. Like the moment solidified into something real, something permanent. Lauren gagged and turned away. "That bastard," she said once she caught her breath. I'd never heard that kind of rage in her voice. "We're going to the police. Right now." "I know," I said, and then my voice cracked. "I'm scared, Law. What if he finds out I know? He's been drugging me for months. I don't even know what else he did to me while I was asleep." The thought made my skin crawl. The videos I suspected, the ones I knew existed. Lauren squeezed my hand hard. "Listen to me. We're going straight to the police. We'll show them everything. We'll get you somewhere safe. He is never touching you again. Ever." I nodded, clung to those words like a lifeline. She started the car, and we drove downtown. Every second of that ride felt dangerous. My foot tapped non-stop. I checked the mirrors, looked behind us. Once, I ducked when a car passed that looked too familiar. It wasn't him. But fear doesn't care about logic. Walking into the police station felt unreal, like I was floating outside my body. When I told the desk officer, "I need to report a crime, multiple crimes, committed by my husband," my voice barely sounded like my own. At first, I worried they'd brush me off. Another emotional wife, another domestic dispute. But the moment I said, "I have evidence my husband drugged me, and I witnessed him trafficking someone last night," everything changed. We were taken to a private room. A female detective came in, Martinez. Her voice was calm, steady. She looked at me like she understood how close I was to breaking. Lauren stayed beside me, her hand tight in mine. I told the story again, all of it. Strangely, it felt easier this time, like I was numb, like I was narrating something that happened to someone else. I handed over the pill, the flash drive. I told them about the cameras, the laptop, the recordings I believed existed. Then Martinez asked gently, "Jane, did you ever see any videos of yourself? Or others? Shame burned through me. I didn't watch them, I said quietly, but I saw enough to know. I think he filmed me. I think he let others while I was unconscious. Lauren sucked in a sharp breath. I couldn't look at her. I stared at the floor. Martinez's jaw tightened. We will seize all of it, she said. You won't have to see any of those files, but they will help put him away. That's when I realized this was no longer just my nightmare. It was a criminal case. The station came alive around me. Phones ringing, officers moving quickly. Martinez sent teams to secure our house, to detain Brian quietly. Alerts went out for the van. Hours later, they found it. They rescued the girl. When I heard that, I collapsed into sobs of relief. For the first time since this began, someone was safe. And for the first time in months, I believed I might be too. By the time I finished describing the girl and the van, Lauren was crying too. She kept shaking her head, whispering under her breath. I could hear the disbelief in her voice, not because she doubted me, but because she understood how bad it really was. I believe you, she said firmly. I believe every word. This is horrific, Jane. I reached into my purse. My fingers felt numb as I pulled out the flash drive and my phone. I needed her to see it. I needed myself to see it again, to remind myself this wasn't some twisted dream. The video was short, shaky, but clear. Brian's face. The man beside him. The girl being carried through my back door. Watching it again made my stomach turn, like the moment locked itself into my bones. Lauren gagged and turned away. That bastard, she said quietly, but with venom. We're going to the police. Right now. I know, I said, and that's when my voice broke. I'm scared, Law. What if he finds out I know? He's been drugging me for months. I don't even know what he did to me while I was asleep. The thought made my skin crawl. The missing memories, the videos I hadn't watched, but knew existed. Lauren grabbed my hand hard. Listen to me. We're going straight to the police. We'll show them everything. We'll get you somewhere safe. He is never touching you again. I nodded, held on to that promise like it was the only solid thing left. She started the car, and we headed downtown. Every minute of that drive felt dangerous. My foot wouldn't stop tapping. I kept checking the mirrors. Once, I ducked when a car passed that looked too familiar. It wasn't him, but fear doesn't wait for proof. Walking into the police station felt unreal, like my body was moving on autopilot. When I said, I need to report a crime, multiple crimes, committed by my husband, my voice sounded distant to my own ears. For a moment, I worried they'd dismiss me. Another emotional wife, another domestic issue. But when I said, I have evidence my husband drugged me and trafficked someone last night, everything changed. They moved us to a private room. A female detective introduced herself Martinez. Her voice was calm, steady, like she knew I was holding myself together by a thread. Lauren stayed beside me, her hand locked in mine. I told the story again. Every detail. This time, it felt different. Like I was numb. Like I was describing something I'd watched happen to someone else. I handed over the pill, the flash drive. I told them about the cameras, the laptop, the files I believed were hidden at home. Then Detective Martinez asked softly, Jane, did you ever see any recordings of yourself? Or anyone else? Heat rushed to my face. I didn't watch them, I said, but I saw enough to know. I think he filmed me. I think he let others while I was unconscious. Lauren sucked in a sharp breath. I couldn't look at her. I stared at the floor. Martinez's jaw tightened. We will seize all of it, she said. You will not have to look at those recordings, but they will help put him away. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just my nightmare anymore. This was a case. The station came alive around us. Phones ringing, officers moving quickly. They sent teams to secure the house, to detain Brian. Alerts went out for the van. Hours later, they found it. They rescued the girl. When I heard that, I broke down. For the first time since this started, someone was safe. And for the first time in months, I believed I might be too. The days and weeks that followed were chaotic and exhausting. Everything moved at once, too fast to process, too heavy to escape. Brian was formally charged, not with one crime, with many. Administering drugs to commit felonies, human trafficking, sexual assault, illegal surveillance, conspiracy. Hearing the charges listed out loud felt unreal, like they belonged to someone else, not the man I once trusted with my life. The story broke locally first, then nationally, almost overnight. One morning, I saw the headlines scrolling across a news channel. Respected local man accused of drugging wife, trafficking women. I stared at the screen. It felt like watching a movie about someone else's life. Only this time, I knew every detail. And there was no rewinding it. Reporters camped outside our house. They showed up outside Lauren's place too. After they dug up the fact that I'd been staying with her once I left the safe house, they were everywhere. Cars parked on the street, cameras waiting, people watching. It became impossible to breathe like that. So I ended up temporarily relocating. I went to stay with my parents in a different state. While the legal case moved forward, it wasn't just about privacy. It was about sanity and safety. The police supported the move. They coordinated with law enforcement where my parents lived. Extra awareness, extra eyes, just in case. In some ways, it was humiliating. Being a grown woman, packing up her life, fleeing under protection. That part hurt my pride more than I wanted to admit. But beneath all of that, there was something stronger. Gratitude. Gratitude beyond words. For quiet nights, for closed doors, for waking up without fear. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe, and I held on to that feeling like it mattered, because it did. According to Detective Martinez, the morning they took him in, he pretended he had no idea what was happening. He actually told the officers something like, "Officer, there must be a mistake. My wife is unwell. She's been very confused lately." When I heard that, it made my blood boil. Even then, even with handcuffs on, he was still trying to rewrite reality. Gaslighting right to the very end. They didn't buy it. Not after what they found in the basement, in his office. Hard drives, cloud storage accounts, folders upon folders of files, videos, images, many of them of me, unconscious, vulnerable, put on display without my consent. They also found records, transactions, messages, communications with other perpetrators, names, dates, payments. Learning how organized it all was turned my stomach. This wasn't some momentary lapse. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't desperation. It was systematic, planned. This wasn't something Brian fell into. It was practically a second career. The toxicology tests on me identified exactly what he'd been giving me, just like I suspected. It was a strong cocktail, mostly a high dose of a benzodiazepine, similar to Rohypnol, strong enough to knock me out cold. On top of that, he mixed in over-the-counter sleep aids to mask the taste. Poison wrapped in a lie. That's how the prosecutor later described it. And it fit perfectly. Once I knew that, a million small things started clicking into place. The timing, the patterns, the so-called vitamins he started giving me lined up almost exactly with when his communications with traffickers began to ramp up. There were emails where he actually bragged about how easy it was to keep me under control. One message said, "Don't worry about my wife. She'll be asleep." I read every single one of those messages while preparing for trial. Every disgusting word. Reading them made my hands shake. Not fear, anger. Legally, the case against him was overwhelming. But that didn't mean it was quick. There were hearings, delays, motions, then eventually, the trial. At one point, prosecutors offered him a plea deal. Decades in prison in exchange for information on other ring members. He turned it down. Through his lawyer, he claimed some of the charges were exaggerated, that he never physically hurt me or the others. Hearing that made me want to scream. As if drugging someone unconscious wasn't physical. As if what he allowed to happen didn't count. He was delusional if he believed that. I was subpoenaed to testify, first before a grand jury, then at trial, standing in that room, telling strangers what had been done to me, was one of the hardest things I've ever done. My body shook. I cried through half of it. My parents were there. Lauren too. When I described waking up with bruises or seeing the footage, the looks on their faces were almost too much to bear. Brian sat at the defense table, thinner than before, hollowed out. He never once looked at me. That was fine by me. I had no desire to see any more of him. The trial was long and grueling. Day after day, hour after hour. The defense used some of the ugliest tactics I'd ever heard. They tried to suggest I was a willing participant in some so-called kinky lifestyle, that I had known about the filming, that I had consented. It was nonsense. The evidence tore those claims apart. But hearing it said out loud still made my blood boil, still made my hands curl into fists. They also tried another angle. They claimed Brian wasn't a key player, that he'd been pressured by bigger fish in the trafficking ring, that he was almost a victim himself, someone who got in over his head. That argument didn't last long. The prosecutors brought out email after email, message after message. Brian negotiating prices, setting schedules, coordinating logistics. Then came the worst part. They showed evidence that he had recruited another man into the scheme. Not just recruiting him, but advising him, explaining how to drug his wife. It turned out he'd been sharing his techniques on a dark web forum. Writing like it was just another skill. I watched the jury's faces change. I saw them recoil. I couldn't look at him after that revelation. I honestly thought I might leap out of the witness box and strangle him. When the verdict finally came, it was swift. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Over and over. I released a sobbing breath I didn't even realize I'd been holding. My knees gave out. Lauren caught me as I collapsed into her arms. I cried with relief. The nightmare wasn't over. Not completely. But that chapter was. At sentencing, I gave a victim impact statement. I'd written it carefully, with my therapist's help, over weeks. Still, nothing could prepare me for standing just a few feet away from him. I told him how he destroyed the woman I used to be, how every I love you he ever said now cuts like a knife, because it was all a lie. I told him about the panic attacks, the insomnia, the way I still struggled to trust my own mind some days, because he trained me to doubt myself. I told him he stole my sense of safety, my home, my ability to sleep without fear. My voice trembled, but I didn't stop. He needed to hear it, all of it, exactly what he did to me. And for the first time, he had no way to escape the truth, Brian cried. He actually sat there, in handcuffs, and cried while I spoke. In another life, I might have rushed forward. I might have reached for someone I loved who was breaking down like that. But not there, not in that courtroom. Seeing his tears didn't soften me. It gave me a strange, grim satisfaction. I didn't care whether they were real, or self-pity, or some last-ditch legal performance. They meant nothing to me now. So I looked straight at him and said, I hope you spend every one of your remaining days remembering what you did, and I hope it haunts you. My voice echoed through the silent courtroom. He didn't look back. He dropped his head and sobbed quietly. Too little, too late. The judge sentenced him to what essentially amounts to life in prison, decades upon decades. No chance of parole for a very long time, if ever. Given his age, he'll be an old man if he ever walks free again. The other men who were caught were sentenced too. Heavy time, especially the one who carried the girl. I testified to that scene. It's on record forever. When it was finally over, I felt empty. People expect a victim to feel happy, or triumphant, or healed, and I was relieved, yes, but it didn't undo anything. It didn't give me back what was taken. I walked out of that courthouse changed forever. Justice had been served, but healing, that was still ahead of me, Brian cried. He actually had the nerve to sit there, in handcuffs, and cry while I spoke. In another life, I might have run to comfort someone I loved who was crying that hard. But in that courtroom, seeing his tears didn't move me. It gave me a kind of grim satisfaction. I didn't care whether they were genuine, or self-pity, or some legal strategy. They meant nothing to me now. So I looked him in the eye and said, I hope you spend every one of your remaining days remembering what you did, and I hope it haunts you. My voice echoed in the silent courtroom. He didn't meet my gaze. He dropped his head and sobbed quietly. Too little, too late. The judge sentenced him to what essentially amounts to life in prison. Dozens upon dozens of years. No chance of parole for a very long time, if ever. Given his age, he'll be an old man if he ever gets out. The other men involved who were caught received heavy sentences too, especially the one who physically carried the girl. I testified to that scene. It's on record. When it was over, I felt empty. People expect a victim to feel happy, or relieved, or whole again. And I was relieved, yes, but it didn't undo any of it. Not a single moment. I walked out of that courthouse changed forever. For a long time, I had panic attacks, especially at night. If I woke up at 2 a.m. for any reason, my heart would start racing. I'd break into a sweat, convinced there was danger nearby. That was the hour I'd discovered so much evil, and my body remembered it. I found myself triple checking every lock in whatever house I slept in. Even though brain was locked away, trauma isn't logical. My mind knew I was safe, but my body only knew that home had once become dangerous, and it didn't trust that safety had really returned. Support groups helped too. I met other survivors. Some had lived through domestic abuse, some through sexual assault, some through trafficking. Every story was different, but there were common threads: pain and resilience. For the first few meetings, I mostly sat and listened. I wasn't ready to speak yet. Eventually, I did. And there's something powerful about someone nodding and saying, "I understand," because you know they really do. Rebuilding trust has been the hardest journey of all. I became jumpy around men, even good men. My father would gently pat my shoulder, and I'd have to fight the urge to flinch. A friendly cashier at the grocery store asked how my day was, and I froze. For a while, I resented Brian even for that. He poisoned my ability to accept basic kindness from half the human population. But I refused to let that be permanent. I worked at it, slowly. I remember the first time I decided to meet up with a male colleague from my new job. I'd eventually returned to teaching in a different school district. We were work friends. A group of us would sometimes grab lunch. One weekend, a few colleagues invited me to a farmer's market. I knew he'd be there. I almost didn't go. Then I thought, no, I deserve normalcy. And for the first time in a long while, I chose to show up. It went fine. I was anxious, yes, but nothing bad happened. Little by little, experiences like that started chipping away at the wall of fear. After a year or so, I moved out of my parents' place and into my own little apartment in a different city for a fresh start. It was both exciting and terrifying to live alone. The first night there, I barely slept. Every creak made my heart pound. I ended up pushing a dresser in front of the bedroom door and sleeping with the lights on habits from the worst of times. But each night got a tiny bit easier. I also poured myself into something new. I started volunteering with an organization that helps trafficking survivors. It felt important, a way to turn my ordeal into something useful. Through that, I met incredible people, heroes, really, who had been through hell and were building lives of meaning and hope. They inspired me to keep pushing forward. Now, as I sit here telling this story, it's been almost 2 years since that fateful night. Am I healed? That's a complicated word. I have healed in some ways. I no longer wake up and immediately feel dread. I laugh now, real, genuine laughter, something I thought I might never do again. I can talk about what happened without falling apart. Okay, I cried a bit telling you, but I held it together better than I thought I would. There are parts of me still mending. Trust, for one. I haven't dated anyone since Brian's arrest. The very idea used to make me anxious. But I'm starting to believe that maybe not all love is a lie. I've seen beautiful examples of healthy love among my friends and in survivor communities. And recently, well, I'll share this. There's someone new in my life. It's a budding friendship that has the potential for more, perhaps. We met at a community art class of all places. I took it up as a therapeutic hobby. His name is Aidan. He's gentle and funny, and when he asked me out for coffee, I nearly said no. But I took a breath and said yes. I told him, very briefly, that I came out of a rough marriage and I need to take things slow. He respected that instantly. We're still just getting to know each other, and I'm taking tiny steps. The first time he casually reached for my hand during a walk, I flinched. Instead of getting offended, he simply apologized and said, "We go at your pace." Do you know how relieving that was? He understands I have scars. He even knows the broad strokes of what happened. I shared some, since it's public record, and I figured honesty was best. He didn't look at me with pity or horror. Just compassion. I won't pin a fairy tale ending here. I have no idea where things with Aiden will go. Maybe we'll grow closer. Maybe we're better as friends. But the hope I feel, the openness to even explore a connection is something I never thought I'd experience again. And that is enough for now. One crisp evening recently, I stepped out onto the balcony of my apartment with a cup of herbal tea. I watched the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple, and I realized I felt peaceful. I almost didn't recognize the feeling. Life was by no means perfect. Trauma doesn't just vanish because you convicted the bad guy. I still go to therapy. I still have an occasional nightmare. But I wasn't living in that nightmare anymore. I was living beyond it. I share my story not to scare, but to shed light. I was an educated, independent woman, and it still happened to me. Evil often wears a charming mask. If you find yourself questioning your reality or feeling isolated in a relationship, please, please pay attention to those red flags. No amount of love is worth losing your sense of self or safety. And for anyone who has been through something like this, I want you to see that there is another side. There's survival, and even life after survival. It may take time and help, lots of help, but you can reclaim your story. I'm doing it one day at a time. Brian stole many things from me, my trust, my innocence, time with loved ones, and countless nights of my life. But he did not steal me. I am more than what he tried to reduce me to. I am a daughter, a friend, a teacher, an artist, a maybe someday lover again, and absolutely, unequivocally, a survivor. Every night now, I fall asleep under my own terms. No more pills, no more secrets in the dark. Just me, often curled up with a soft blanket that I bought as a gift to myself. Some nights I still cry, but many nights I smile as I drift off, because I know I'll wake up to a tomorrow that's mine to shape, safe, free, and hopeful. If you've listened to my story this far, thank you. Truly. The kindness of strangers, your kindness helps patch the wounds I carry. I need this story to be heard, not only for my own healing, but so that it might help someone else recognize a dangerous situation before it's too late, or find courage to escape one. There's a saying I came across in my support group. Trauma may write chapters of your life, but resilience writes the rest. Brian wrote a horrific chapter, yes, but I'm writing the rest now. And I choose for it to be a story not of tragedy, but of triumph. Thank you for listening. Please take care of yourselves and each other.